The German tanks were barely 10 miles from Dunkirk, with almost nothing left in front of them. Then Hitler gave the strangest order of the war. Stop. May 1940. The German army has just done the impossible. Through the Ardennes, across the Meuse, and in a 10-day sprint to the sea that cut the Allied armies in two. Now the British Expeditionary Force, the French First Army, and what's left of the Belgians are sealed in a shrinking pocket against the Channel coast. 250,000 men, with one port left behind them, and 9 panzer divisions in front of them. Every hour, the pocket gets smaller. There is no plan that saves this army, and then the Germans stop moving. By the 23rd of May, the spearhead of that German advance, Göring's 1st Panzer Division, was standing on the Aa Canal at Gravelines, the last waterline before Dunkirk itself. From the high ground, Göring's army could see the town. His engineers were already throwing bridges across the canal. But that same day, 2 phone calls were changing the battle. General von Keist reported his panzer force was down to half strength after 2 weeks of non-stop advance. And Hermann Göring called Hitler personally with a promise. His Luftwaffe alone could destroy the trapped armies from the air. The tanks didn't need to do it. The tanks didn't even need to move. That evening, it wasn't even Hitler who stopped the panzers. It was Field Marshal von Rundstedt, the army group commander on the spot, who ordered the armour to halt on the canal line and let the infantry catch up. The most famous order of the campaign wasn't the Führer's idea. What Hitler did was fly to Rundstedt's headquarters at Charleville the next morning, the 24th of May, look at the map and make the halt his own. The Army High Command was furious. Its Chief of Staff, General Hadler, wrote in his diary, "The pocket would have been closed at the coast if only our armour had not held back." The order stood anyway.
Befehl des Führers. Die Panzer halten an der Kanallinie. Halt!
So why stop? 3 reasons, and you can see all 3 on the map. First, the ground. This is Flanders, canal country, marshlands, and the same kind of mud German generals remembered from the First World War. Bad tank country, said Rundstedt, and his armour was already half worn out. It was needed intact for the next battle, the rest of France. Second, the promise. Göring had asked for Dunkirk, and the order that followed said, in effect, leave Dunkirk to the Luftwaffe. Why spend tanks on what bombers could finish? And third, the reason nobody wrote in an order, command politics. The Army High Command had tried to take control of the battle away from Rundstedt. When Hitler backed Rundstedt's halt, he wasn't endorsing caution, he was reminding his own generals who commanded. Caution, a promise, and a power struggle. For 3 days, that was enough to stop an army that nothing on the battlefield could. And in those 3 days, everything changed. On the 26th of May, Britain launched Operation Dynamo, the evacuation it had been quietly preparing for almost a week. The defensive perimeter took shape around Dunkirk, anchored on canals from Gravelines round to the Belgian coast. That same day, Calais fell, its garrison of 4,000 men ordered to fight to the end, with no evacuation, to buy the pocket of time. And at 3:30 that afternoon, Hitler rescinded that whole order. It still took most of the panzer divisions another 16 hours to get moving. When they finally attacked, on the morning of the 27th of May, the armour stood still for 3 days. And the first 7,500 men had already sailed for England. It was a race now. Watch the two numbers, the pocket shrinking and the count of men lifted off the coast climbing. 17,000 on the 28th of May, the day Belgium surrendered and tore a 20-mile gap in the line. 47,000 on the 29th, 53,000 on the 30th, 68,000 on the last day of May alone. Göring's Luftwaffe never came close to its promise. In the whole 9 days of the evacuation, the weather gave it barely 2.5 days of clear flying. The RAF met it over the beaches, and the bombing that did get through mostly turned Dunkirk into rubble that defended better than streets. And to the south, the French First Army, surrounded at Lille, fought to the last day of May, holding German divisions that might have been at the perimeter instead. By the 4th of June it was over. 338,226 men had been carried to England. More than 100,000 of them were French. It wasn't free. 9 destroyers and more than 200 vessels sunk. 145 RAF aircraft lost. Tens of thousands of French soldiers who held the final perimeter went into captivity when the town fell. And across the campaign, for roughly every 7 men of the British Army who escaped, 1 was left behind as a prisoner. Rundstedt called the Halt one of the great turning points of the war. And he was there. You'll still hear that myth that Hitler stopped the tanks on purpose to let the British escape and make peace. Almost no historian believes that. What the evidence shows is a smaller and stranger, a tied army, a cautious field marshal, an Air Force chief's boast, and a dictator more interested in who gave the orders than what they cost. 3 days of standing still, and 300,000 soldiers who lived to fight the rest of the war because of them. The miracle of Dunkirk was real. It just wasn't a miracle. It was a decision. And it wasn't even Hitler's. If you want the other half of this story, the 3 weeks of collapse that put an army on the beach of the first place, that video is on your screen right now. Subscribe, and we'll keep mapping the decisions everybody else skips.